Those are great stories. Anybody else that you can remember that you have a really memorable story of?
Oh gosh, there are 10,000 stories in the Naked City, and those were about one of them. Well, I don't know why I thought of this one, but I was working on a Carly Simon record, and she wasn't even there that one day. We were overdubbing a harmony vocal with John Travolta.
Nice.
And John Travolta shows up with this dozen, like, ridiculously nice long stem red roses, right? He sings the day. And yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, he kind of sang. Yeah, it was all right. And then he leaves, leaving behind the aforementioned dozen, very expensive, I'm sure, red roses. Okay, the day before, I was involved with a video shoot for, like, Camel cigarettes or something. They had block booked Capitol Records, Capitol Studios, for a video shoot, and they had, or a still, actually it was still, for a magazine shot. And they had hired some, actor types to simulate singing and playing guitar and stuff. And myself, you could see me in the control room through the glass, while the musicians are, pseudo-musicians are there. So anyway, that was the shot for the print ad, as I believe they're called. But the girl who was like the director of the shoot, if you will, was this really hot girl. And, being an engineer in the studios, you don't get to meet that many hot girls. It's really rare and a wonderful thing if you do. So I was smitten. And to make the story go, I had invited her out to dinner at the end of that day, the day that we met and we did the shoot together. And she kind of, I was not exactly beneath, beneath the radar or off the radar or whatever. But she was not too terribly plussed by the invite. So I knew she was staying at the Hotel Marmont down the road on Sunset. So I had one of the assistants take these roses that John Travolta had meant to get to Carly Simon, and I repurposed them, right? So anyway, so obviously I got over with the beautiful director girl, had my one moment of whatever, and then John Travolta's office or whatever calls the next day, hey, we left some very nice roses there the other day. Can you have them ready for somebody? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. But I think housekeeping threw them out. So,
no.
Not exactly a Carly Simon story, but
the real question is, was it worth it? Did you get the girl?
Oh gosh, yes, it was definitely worth it, and I hope he enjoyed it too. But I mean, another long session. Actually, I actually got to work with Frank Sinatra 3 different times, and we did at Capitol. We did 2 duets records,
right?
Which were very involved and were multiple days. But when I was at Wally Heider's, a decade or 2 before, we did a Christmas record with Frank. That just had like a kids choir and a small band, and what I remember about that one was that Frank was notorious for, if he showed up a half hour late or a half hour early, that's when you started, right? So there's one day on the Christmas record with the kids, he shows up way early, and there's only a few guys in the band that are there, and Frank's itchy to go, and so one of the trumpet players says, Frank was sitting there on the piano bench. He said, Frank, can you give us an A? And Frank turns around and, he's talking and he hits the note and it wasn't an A. And, the musicians say, Frank, no, that's not an A. And Frank's assistant, shall we say, says, hey, if Frank says that's an A, that's a fucking A. That was the start of Merry Christmas to you and yours, right? Now fast forward, God, it's got to be 15, almost 20 years later. It was 91 that we did the first Sinatra duets records. I don't know. It was quite a while ago, so forgive me. But it matters not. He had been on Capitol way back in the day, and then he was lured over to Warner Brothers, where they actually made a label for him, Reprise, if you like. And he was on Reprise for 15, 20 years. And now, I guess that deal had expired, and they lured him back to Capitol. And this was going to be the duets record. I remember the salient point was they were going to pair him up with people who are selling records today.
Yeah, I remember that.
Not just more museum pieces. So they were trying to find a whole new audience for him, which was kind of clever at the time. And we did people like when we were doing the tracks, we did Frank live with a band, and it was just amazing. There's a bunch of stories that are probably beyond the scope of the time to tell about this one, but when we did the duet, like we did, Barbra Streisand was chosen to do I Got a Crush on You. Mm-hmm. That song, I forget who the writers are, but it's a very famous.
Of course.
We've heard it a million times. So when Frank did his bit, not only did we not know who was the duet person, we weren't exactly sure what lines they were going to sing.
Right.
And when we didn't get a great line from Frank, I guess that's one of the things we're going to need the duet person to do, right? So when Barbra Streisand did her thing, none of the duets were done with Frank.
Right.
He was already done live with the band. But when Barbara did her overdub, she sang one of the lines. She said, "I've got a crush on you, Francis," to foster the illusion that they really were standing next to one another and singing. So Charlie Picari, at the time, that is, my dear friend, and the late, great Phil Ramone, who was the producer on the record, they drove out to Palm Springs, with a little handheld device, and, look, out to one of Frank's homes out there, and tried to beseech him to sing, "I've got a crush on you, Barbara." Right? They pitched that idea to him. He said, "Fuck no, I'm not singing Barbara." "Thank you." So they get back to the studio. Now we finally have the computer technology. So they took him saying Barbara and pitched it and stretched it and flew it in.
You were kidding me.
And that's on the record that you will hear today and have been able to hear for, 20-some years by now. "I've got a crush on you, Barbara." And that was, the modern miracle of
Splice away.
Whatever. Yeah.